Growing questions tonight about Vice President Mike Pence and his claims that he was kept in the dark about Mike Flynn's talks with Russia's former ambassador to the U.S. I want to bring you now CNN legal analyst Laura Coates, national security and legal analyst Susan Hennessy, and legal commentator Ken Cuccinelli. Good evening. Thank you for coming on. Hi, Susan. Let's start with you. So according to the court filings, Flynn spoke with senior members of the presidential transition team about his conversations with the Russian ambassador. Pence was the head of the transition. So how plausible is it that he really didn't know about any of this for nearly a year?
Also, sort of considering how chaotic and dysfunctional the early transition was, I suppose that's a pretty good defense, right? Maybe Pence really was kept out of the loop. The more interesting period of time is the period of time between January 15th, when then Vice President-elect Pence goes on national television and tells the American people unequivocally that Michael Flynn did not discuss sanctions with Sergei Kislyak during that call, and what occurs between that time and February 13th, when Donald Trump actually fires Michael Flynn for lying to the FBI and for lying to Pence. So sort of the timeline gap that we don't have quite yet is, when did Pence learn not only that Mike Flynn had lied to him, but actually that he had made a really substantial material misrepresentation to the American people, and how long did he allow that falsehood to exist, without coming forward to correct it? So
Ken, you guys were stepping on each other. I couldn't hear what you said. So you just strike this all up to chaos in the White House?
Well, I was laughing because I have made that explanation myself in the past. And look, for your viewers, I worked against the Trump team on the Cruz team in the primary, and chaos reigned in their camp. And frankly, the chaos theory, somehow or another, for the only time in American history, worked for them in the campaign. And when they picked Reince Priebus as chief of staff, that chaos continued right into the White House. I mean, General Kelly was a good pick in the sense that he's starting to bring order to that. There is an awful lot that went in, not just in the transition, but way, way into this first year of the Trump White House that was truly chaotic. And that is not a predictable or well-managed way to govern, whether it relates to this issue or any other. As it relates to Vice President Pence, I can't think of anywhere that the Vice President has been willing to sort of shoot from the lip in the way the President does on Twitter a lot and so forth. He's been
awfully quiet lately.
Well, not just lately, but he has preserved, I think, his reputation for honesty and accuracy on his own part as much as a vice president can, because he doesn't drive the train.
But the folks around him didn't help him, including
Flynn. I agree completely with you. And this situation, to the point earlier made, the interesting period here is January 15th to February 13th, is I would find it very surprising for the vice president, as opposed to, say, the president, if he went on national television and said something like that he knew to be false. That would be very shocking to me.
Laura, I am interested in hearing what you have to say about this next thing. I don't know if you want to weigh on the other thing, but this is what I've been wanting to ask you about. The president's personal lawyer has been arguing that presidents are legally unable to obstruct justice, but the exact opposite view was once argued by another senior lawyer working with Trump, Attorney General Jeff Sessions. I want you to take a listen. This is him talking about President Clinton. This is 1999. Let's play it.
I am concerned about a president under oath being alleged to have committed perjury. I hope that he can rebut that and prove that did not happen. I hope he can show he did not commit obstruction of justice and that he can complete his term. But there are serious allegations that occurred. And in America, and Supreme Court and the American people believe no one is above the law. And the president has gotten himself into this fix that is very serious. I intend to give him an absolutely fair trial.
I mean, listen, there's a tweet and a soundbite for everything, and that one back from the TV time machine from 1999. So is Sessions right? Presidents can't obstruct justice?
Yes, the president can obstruct justice, and he's not above the law, and any notion to the contrary is absolutely ludicrous and not legally persuasive at all. And here's why. people talk about Article 2 and the President of the United States being able to have to enforce and faithfully execute the laws of the land. Well, that actually presumes he has to follow the laws of the land and that he himself cannot be above them. Imagine, if you will, the instance where the President of the United States commits an offense and a violation that's particularly heinous. Are we going to hit the President cannot, by virtue of the fact that he is currently the President, can have broken a law? The distinction, Don, is whether or not he can be actually indicted as a sitting president, or whether it's referred to impeachment and eventually could actually be indicted, but not whether or not they actually could commit an offense. And on the first issue about Mike Pence, I find it extremely shocking to believe that there is somebody like Mike Pence, who is the most seasoned of all the political operatives who are surrounding the orbit of Donald Trump, that he is not engaging in kind of a perverse version of don't ask and don't tell me anything, so that I can maintain my credibility in front of a criminal probe or the court of public opinion at the expense of my own credibility as someone who doesn't know anything. But I can reasonably say I've got plausible deniability here. I have no idea what's going on, so you cannot hold me accountable in any law that requires my knowledge or my intent. But that's as legally absurd to me as the concept of the President of the United States being somehow immune from the obligations that everyone else is. He certainly has some privileges, and it is good to be the king, but you can still obstruct even if you are.
As you were saying that, as you were reading my mind, I was writing plausible deniability, right, on my little blue card here. I mean, Susan, what do you think? What does that say that the Trump administration is using this argument in the first place?
Yeah, so I think that, I completely agree with Laura regarding sort of the questions of legality. As a strategic matter, it is sort of interesting, right? We've seen this shift before, going from sort of, asserting that factually there was no collusion, there was no coordination, and then moving to, well, collusion isn't a crime. Now we're seeing, sort of once again, this kind of subtle step from, the president did not obstruct justice as a factual matter, and then moving into, well, the president can't obstruct justice as a legal matter. And so once again, I think they're a little bit moving the goalpost here. This administration sort of tends to shed a light on the areas that they're most insecure about, they're most concerned about. So I do think that is a significant alteration in the president's strategy, and one that now his own White House lawyers are really trying to walk back.
That last one is called projection. So let's talk about obstruction of justice. Being the president can obstruct justice, but you said being convicted. I saw you nodding your head. Being convicted of it is an entirely different thing.
Well, I think Laura made an important distinction that it really is up in the air, is whether or not a president can be indicted while they're the president for federal charges versus impeachment, which is always available as a constitutional matter, and I think is the expected course. I also think that in some of the discussion, this could get sliced more finely. So let me use some real-world examples. The firing of Jim Comey, the firing of Jim Comey, an executive act, not specifically case-related per se, is going to be a lot harder to make any sort of case for obstruction of justice with President Trump than the kind of example that you showed Jeff Sessions using, where you have a specific case where the president is a participant in the violation of the law.
Live under oath.
And I just picked that one because you played a clip on it. I'm sure I could come up with 1,000 other examples. But when you leave the management role of the president, the chief executive of the federal government, where I think it's much harder to make a legitimate case under the Constitution for obstruction of justice, down to a participating person in what would be alleged to be a criminal act, those are two different analyses. Right. And I have not heard that distinction made in a lot of the discussion in the last week.
There are other people standing by in other studios, and they need to get on and have their say. So thank you all. I appreciate it. When we come back, the White House calling the allegations of sexual impropriety against Roy Moore troubling, but apparently not too troubling, as the president throws his endorsement behind him. Other Republicans changing their tune, falling in line as well. Is a GOP putting party over principle?